Hey, what's up, guys? It's MyGamesGX here, and we are going to be doing episode 3 of how to play Branded. And I want to talk about something that a lot of people ask me about, and this is side patterns. So, we're going to do like an episode about side patterns here and just teach you guys how and what to do, especially into like this example kind of meta, but just like the fundamentals of like what it means to side with Branded Despia correctly and in a way that will make it so that you will be able to cover all your matchups. So we will cover what a side deck is supposed to do, what are the strengths of, or like, and then you have to decide what the idea is of what you want your side deck to do, basically. So we're going to talk about that, and then we're going to talk about side patterns as well. It's going to be a little bit nebulous, it'll be all over the place, but let's get right into it. So why do you have a side deck in the first place? A side deck is supposed to cover extra matchups, essentially, with your deck that you don't normally have a great matchup into, or deficiencies in your deck in certain scenarios, or just like easy buttons in order to win a game against a certain matchup, right? This is why we run Droll and Lockbird for a reason, because this card quite literally just is one of the only stopgaps for certain decks that just search a ton and prevents them from really playing the game on a way that is it is manageable for you as a player to break their board as a Branded player. So that's why in other decks for that reason as well. But then there's other cards too, like Dark Ruler No More, which is just kind of an easy button. And if you see like this are evenly matched, or like Perilia too, it's these cards are just absolute blowouts. But then they also have other applications, and then there's also cards in your side deck that are siding pattern specific, in the sense that this is only a card I'm going first and going second. This applies to every card in the side deck. But, for instance, a lot of Branded players end up running Molcharmi Fulos in their main deck, and a lot of other players do in their Yu-Gi-Oh decks too. So this guide's going to apply to anyone who's playing Yu-Gi-Oh, frankly. But, so in games like 2 and 3, when you're going first, you don't necessarily want cards in your deck that are good. So let's just say you're going first game 2 because you lost game 1. You don't want a card in your deck that's only good going second if you're going first, right? So cards like Dark Ruler No More, if that's in your main deck, for instance, or Molcharmi Fulos, which is in my main deck right here, I never keep in going first. Yes, it's a monster I can use for a discard or Branded High Spirits, but I think that we can have like a way better time and more efficient side patterns and more powerful cards and interactions, because I think name of the game with Yu-Gi-Oh is powerful interactions. A lot of the time you can just outpower kind of people on plays, and just based on card quality alone, right? That's why like Talents and Called By, these cards are blowouts when they hit the board. Same with Fubulos, right? They're some of the best cards in the game, because if you have this card in hand with like some starters, like in the right scenario, you just win the game on the spot. And you want to increase your likelihood of having those types of things, and the side deck certainly helps that. But like, for instance, going first, you can side in better things than just Fulos that can give you that type of opportunity, right? Normally one of my favorite siding patterns for going first in Branded is Fusion Duplication. I think that Fusion Duplication is one of the cleanest sides that you can have in Branded, because you can side out 3 Fubulos and side in 3 Fusion Duplication, or 2 Thrust and 1 Fusion Duplication, any kind of ratio with Thrust and Fusion Dupe. But I think hard having the Fusion Dupe is actually really good, because then you don't have to, if you get impermed and you still have a way to dump Branded Fusion, for instance, it comes up in other scenarios. So I do think that Fusion Dupe is quite good, because you can just side out the 3 Fulos, and then going first, okay, you get hand trapped. Compare Fulos and Fusion Duplication, right? I get Ash on hand with Molcharmi Fulos, and that means I have one less card for a real follow-up, right? I can't just normal the Fulos or special summon it and link summon it or anything like that. So if that was a Fusion Dupe and I use Branded Fusion, right, and they Ash or whatever, now I have a way to just resolve the Branded Fusion again, right, on my opponent's turn. Target 1 Fusion or Poly in the graveyard and banish it, and then apply its effect. That's why this card was on the Branded Structure deck, right? This is such a great card to be able to, because you can like copy Fusion deployment, but more importantly, it's Branded Fusion. You can also copy Super Poly as well, so that's actually really cool about fusion duplication is that you can target super poly and you don't have to pay the cost because you're applying the effect, so you aren't going to be applying the cost. So that's really cool. And so it just like leads to a lot of really cool interactions if you're able to like play through things like Fulos, right? Because if you get Fulos and you end on fusion, if you hard draw fusion dupe, right, like you're able to play your whole turn on your opponent's turn without giving them many draws. And this is all because you sided it in. And right, this is a card that's only good going first. That's why we were siding in the first place, because if we were maining 3 fusion dupe, or even the fusion dupe in general, a lot of people have just been cutting this from their main deck because it's just bad going second for the most part. So I think that, a lot of the time that this is just like one of those scenarios where it's a card that's perfect for going first sides because it's a blowout going first, and it takes out some use, like it improves your card quality and gives you those types of plays what you want going first, right? You want the ability to build up a really good board, or have ability to play through hand traps, and that's a card to do that. There's also cards like Dracotal Horn, Solemn Strike too. Solemn cards are also very good, and Dragon's Breath. I think Solemn is a bit more generic though, that's why I still like them. So this card's like very good because if you get board broken, you still just have like one of the most powerful negates in the whole game set, right, still in your pocket, and there's no more time rule. So this is also a very good side for something like that. And then going second, once again, you want like blowouts, right? Like you want cover, because a lot of the time with decks, you have to determine what you're trying to do, right? And with Branded Despia in particular, we are usually board breaking, right? We are going to be able to run hand traps. I run hand traps in this build, but it's not that many hand traps. And when the new support comes on, Burst Protocol, if you're running this, if you're watching this now, it's still relevant, even though I don't have the cards in the deck list. And for instance, there are cards that are good only going first, so that going second, you can basically side those out, right? Like for instance, trap cards a lot of the time are really reliable side outs in Branded and other decks, right? Because you don't need Branded Banishment going second. You don't need Dracotal Flame going second a lot of the time. You're usually going for OTK, or you have other ways like the Lock or like Masquerade, so that if you don't OTK them, you can still like basically stop their follow-up really effectively. And these cards don't help you break the board. They're a little bit too slow, right? In 2025, having traps in your hand going second is just not really viable. So, and then you can just like weigh cards on like a mid-range level to determine on like what other cards need to be sided out, whether it's going first or going second, right? So like Branded Opening is a card that you usually want in your deck. However, going second, you're still discarding a card to use it. So especially also this card locks you post Burst Protocol support. So this is a card you can easily like side out, I think 1 or 2 copies going second. I usually never go for the 2 copies. If anything, it's 1 copy, but a lot of the time I've been, it's a hard once per turn. It's a discard, right? It's putting me down a card. It's not necessarily what I want. Branded High Spirits, for similar reasons, I have to discard a card. But High Spirits is a little bit better going second because it pays for itself because of cards like, sending Titanclad. Still going second makes, High Spirits like a board breaker, because this can just summon the Fallen of Albaz out of your deck in the end phase and clean up any monsters you weren't able to get to going second, but you still have to discard a card. So a lot of the time I usually bring this down to 1. Second Quem, if you're running this, is something like, do you need 2 Quems going second, right? You're trying to OTK your opponent. It's just that kind of theory. Maybe even 2 Cartesia on that level. It just depends on what kind of build you're doing. And then like things like Foolish and Goldstar, like these are, or just like generic one-ofs that like Called By Even, like you have to determine like where like these are going to be useful. Do you want to see Called By going second into a deck that is going to set up 20 negates and then the Called By does nothing, right? Like I'd rather have a Dark Ruler in that case, so that's where I'm siding that out. Tri Brigade Mercurier, like, do you need this card going second? Sometimes I like to negate Ash with it if I can do the combo, but that doesn't come up a lot of the time, so it usually gets sided out for me. Same with like Despian Tragedy and things like that. So we'll show you guys some side patterns, and I hope that kind of explains like how the siding goes usually with Branded Despia. And this is kind of like my shameless Dracotal plug. This is why I love the Dracotal cards, because they're good going first and going second. So yeah, you could just side the Dracotal cards, but they're also great going first because like you have these traps, and once again, I'm like siding the 3rd trap as a way going first. So I'm not maining 3 of the Dracotal traps. I'm already maining all the other branded traps. So this is like a way for me to have a better going first through hand traps, because if I'm able to just resolve the Dracotal combos, I can end on 3 traps, which is just like devastating to my opponent. It's 3 draws. I draw into Ash at all, or like a Bastille. It's just like off to the races, right? All right, so we thank God for DB having a siding simulator. Um, so let's just say we're going second into Yummy. What are we gonna want to? These are obviously not cards in the deck build, so ignore these 3 cards. These are just like visual representations. So going second into Yummy, I think like we want to keep in Fubulos. Obviously, if I was going first, maybe not, but you know, the traps, as I mentioned, I think immediately catch my attention. I probably want to side all of these out except for Retribution. Sometimes I keep one trap though, especially if I'm running Thrust in case I need something to like stop the crackback, but I think it's usually just fine if you play correctly to just like side out all the traps, which gives you like in this kind of build like 5 side outs immediately, right? So there's also the concept of having easy side patterns, right? So like if you have, you know, 3 Fulos, that's like an easy 3 side patterns for going first, or just like having these traps, they are easy side outs going second. So it just helps in like a time scenario, especially to have your side patterns down and just like be able to know what you're putting in against what deck. So, and this is generically against like most going second decks. I think these immediately go out, and then you can start cutting cards that you think are not good into certain matchups. Like if I'm into you know, any going second deck, I think 1 High Spirits is pretty good to side out immediately for me. Mercury or Tragedy usually goes out next for me, and then I just see why I still need, right? I have 2 Dark Ruler, 3 Evenly Matched, 3 Perulia, 3 Droll, so theoretically I could do all of these, and then just take out, like I mentioned before, a Foolish, a Gold Sark, but, you know, of course, like, make sure you still have consistency to your deck, and probably a Branded Opening or a Fusion Deployment. Honestly, I'm not a huge fan of Fusion Deployment going second sometimes, or, like I said, the Branded Opening, or even Called By. It just depends. This card I usually keep in against Draco Tail, so, like, just depends for that, but you know, this is why I'd side in generically against things like Yummy, for instance, especially Yummy Mitsurugi. I think this is all like really good. I think Dark Ruler is really solid right now. I think evenly pairs with Dark Ruler and Droplet way too well, so I'd like maybe even run a third evenly. And then like Droll and Lockbird, if I draw like Droll, Fu, or Ash, I just like have a such a like a good chance of like seeing a hand that's just like really like this like this is exactly what I mean. So like, I mean, this is obviously a hand I could have had no matter what, but going first or going second still is just like very solid. So, and against decks like K9 and, you know, it just depends, or I guess, and then going first is against Yummy, once again, it's just like 3 Fualos for Solemn Strike and Draco Talhorm, or like 3 you know, Fusion Duplication and things like that. Also, Droll and Lockbird's a great card going first, which is why I like it as a side pattern a lot of the time, because it's a good like Fualos out, right? Because if you Fualos yourself in Branded, or sorry, if you get Fualos and Branded and you have Droll in your hand, you can Droll yourself after you give them 1 draw, and then they get no more draws, right? So it's like technically like a janky Called By, right? It's also a good like card going or as a interruption piece, right? Like even if you draw it off of one of your Draco Tail traps, or just like having it as an end board piece, right? Is really solid, especially if you get hand traps. So I think this card is just like super high quality. That's also something you have to consider with siding patterns and side like the cards you're putting in your side deck. Like, how useful are they? Are they good both going first or going second? I've seen people side in Solemn Strike going second, non-branded, but like I've seen it happen, right? And like I said, there's that concept of traps. So it's just like having cards that like work going first and going second, I think is like one of like the key milestones of, or key indicators of like this card's a good quality card for the side deck. And then also I mean, then of course you're like, oh, Perulia is only good going second, but it's like that card like says win the game going second, right, against certain decks. So that's why we run it. I'm not running, I don't own Meowls, so I'm not running the Meowls. Maybe I'd have them in here, but you know, for similar reasons. But also I think overloading on Mulcharmies means you have too many cards that are like only good going second. So I like having the Droll maybe over the third set of Mulcharmies, just so I can have something that's good going first and going second, if that makes sense. So that's like always something you have to consider with deck building. So like, you know, if I wanted these Drolls, let's just say I'm going against Mitsurugi, I can always just side out Droplets, right? Like I don't necessarily need Droplets going first. Maybe even just for 2 Drolls, and you know, I'm weird. I have 2 Droplets, so if I had a third, I'd just side out the third for the 3 Droll. Elsewise, it's just like you figure it out. I'm not going to side out a Fusion deployment, frankly, but you can figure that out. So yeah, guys, did you like this video? I just kind of really, you know, I've gotten a lot of questions on like siding patterns. Also, like this exactly applies to Burst Protocol branded, right? So, did you enjoy this guide? What do you guys want to see? Let me know some topics you guys want me to cover on how to play branded. Definitely let me know down below. So, I appreciate it, guys. Have a good rest of your day. We'll be seeing you guys later. Bye now. Also, click the join button, subscribe, leave a comment what you thought your favorite part of this video was if you can. If this video gets you 150 likes, we'll release the next episode. I do appreciate it. Have a great day.